Hello, everyone, and welcome to U.S. History on Location. My name is Mr. Dolan,
And I'm Mr. Vincent.
and today we are in the first permanent English settlement in the New World, better known as Jamestown, and we will be learning about triangular trade and the Atlantic slave trade.
In this video series, you'll follow us around the world as we research the Atlantic slave trade and triangular trade in locations such as Liverpool in the United Kingdom, Ghana in Western Africa, and here in Virginia on the east coast of the United States.
The year was 1609. The mission was the unbelievably difficult task of starting a British colony in the wilderness of North America, a task that had never been achieved before. 20 years earlier, the first attempt to create a British colony at Roanoke Island had been a failure, and all of its inhabitants had disappeared without a trace. 100 miles to the north, the British would try again. This time they would be successful, but at a very high cost for everyone involved. The colony at Jamestown would eventually transform the British Empire into a world power, and lay the foundations for an American empire that was yet to come.
Jamestown was the first permanent British colony. It was founded in 1607 along the banks of the James River that flows out to the Atlantic Ocean. Jamestown was founded by Virginia Company, which was a joint stock company, meaning that its investors shared in the risk and rewards of the colony.
As we just mentioned, Jamestown was funded by Virginia Company, which was a British joint stock company. Using a joint stock company to fund a new colony made good financial sense. Imagine you were a rich British citizen and wanted to start a colony in the early 1600s. If you only used your money, you would have to buy everything needed to start the colony, things like ships for transportation, food, and supplies. If the colony was successful, then you would become very rich and would not have to share the profits with anyone else. But colonies were difficult to create and were not always successful. If the colony failed, then you would lose all your money that you invested and might go bankrupt. A lot of risk was taken by solo investors, but there were also opportunities for big rewards. Joint stock companies reduced some of the risk of starting new colonies. Instead of one person paying for everything, multiple investors put in the money needed to start the colony. If the colony failed, then each investor lost relatively little money. If the colony succeeded, then all investors shared the profits. Joint stock companies made financial sense because they spread risks and rewards evenly amongst a group of investors. Let's look at a modern example to better understand joint stock companies. Imagine there's a new video game coming out that you and your friends have been excited to play. The game costs $100, but you only have $100 that you saved from working all summer. You could buy the game yourself, but you would need to spend all of your money. If the game is awesome, then it might be worth it. But what if it's not that good? You'll be stuck with a bad game and broke. But what if you and your three friends split the cost of the game at $25 each? If the game is bad, then you are only out 25 bucks. And if it's good, then you and your friends could take turns sharing it. This is the same scenario as joint stock companies, multiple people sharing the risks and rewards that came with starting a colony.
The location where the colony was built was immediately an issue, as the swamps along the James River was not conducive to keeping the structures dry. The wet conditions also led to fatal outbreaks of diseases, such as dysentery and malaria. The earliest settlers in Jamestown Colony were mostly men from the upper classes of British society. These upper class men were unaccustomed to doing work with their hands and spent most of their time outside of the colony searching for gold and silver instead of hunting and fishing to prepare for the upcoming winter. This lack of preparation and poor relations with the local native tribes led to hard times in the winter of 1609, where they became known as the starving times, whereas thought that settlers turned to cannibalism to survive the cold winter. Captain John Smith took over leadership of Jamestown Colony and famously stated, "He who does not work, neither shall he eat." And through his leadership, Jamestown was able to survive the first 5 years.
In 1612, colonial leader John Rolfe and his wife Pocahontas developed a new type of tobacco that they had brought back from the West Indies. Soon, this new strand of tobacco became very popular in Europe, and made the colony and its investors a lot of money. Although tobacco was the main crop grown in what became known as the Virginia colony, it was not the only colonial product exported back to Great Britain. Soon, raw goods such as timber and iron were also exported to England, especially during the Industrial Revolution, which began in Britain in 1760. Cotton also became a cash crop for many colonies, and was shipped in large quantities to places like Liverpool, England, for use in their growing textile industry. Britain was becoming filthy rich from the raw goods being exported from America, and Britain realized they needed more colonists to boost their labor force in their colonies. When not enough English citizens were moving to the colonies to work gathering these raw goods, Britain turned to West Africa to fill its labor needs.
In our next video, we'll be loading our ships with cotton and traveling across the Atlantic Ocean to Liverpool, England, where that cotton will be turned into cloth in England's textile factories. This cloth, as well as other manufactured goods, will be traded on the first leg of what becomes known as triangular trade.
Triangular trade is a trade network that is set up between the 16th and 19th century. This trade network connects the Atlantic world. For the rest of this video series, we are going to be answering two essential questions. How does each leg of triangular trade build on each other? And also, how does triangular trade lead to the Atlantic slave trade? Now, see you in Liverpool.
To truly understand the risks and rewards that came from England attempting to start a colony like Jamestown in the New World, we must try and understand the hardships of the colonists themselves. Carving a colony out of a virtual wilderness was no easy task, and during the early years of the colony, 1 out of every 3 colonists died from disease, starvation, and the back-breaking labor needed to survive. As we mentioned earlier in the video, things became pretty tough for the Jamestown colonists in the winter of 1609-1610, and only 38 of the original 104 founding colonists were still alive. Historians and archaeologists believe that because of lack of preparation and poor relations with local Native American tribes, these colonists began to starve to death during that winter and turned to cannibalism to survive. Of course, it is difficult for us to comprehend something as terrible as cannibalism, because we have never been so desperately hungry that we entertain the thought of consuming human flesh. But to truly understand history and the actions of our ancestors that came before us, we must try to place ourselves in their shoes to understand the choices that they made. Follow the link in the description of this video and watch the short video created by Time magazine that details the story of Jamestown Jane, a young girl who lived in the colony during this dark time who archaeologists believe was a victim of cannibalism. After watching the video, answer the following questions. Number 1. Was Jane killed, or was she already dead when she was supposedly eaten? Does this fact make a difference? Number 2. Would you want your loved ones to eat you if you died first? Number 3. What psychological effects would cannibalism have on the colonists? And number 4. Could you eat another human being to survive?